higher order component so allow us to edit the information of a user from the server. So when we run this code, the server send the user details like name, age, hair color. So by the help of this with editable user.js higher order component, we have to edit the data in the user coming from the server. In addition to loading the user from server and passing it to the component that we wrap to change that resource through several props. So here with editable user we are passing the component and user id. So these two arguments we are using here. So this function will return the props. So the component prop is returning here, and there is a constant original user which we are getting from the server, and the current data which we are showing to the client means front end. So this is the backend data, and this is the front end. Initially that is null, and use effect is used to call the API and fetch the data. So inside this you can see this is the asynchronous function and the const response await axios.get. So users so from the server you can see this is the servers, here is the users. So user slash dollar user id, because inside this users we have the key id, so that is we called here user id, because we define here user id, that's why we are calling here the user id. So set original user is response.data, whatever data we are getting by calling particular id, and set user also in the client front end also you are showing the response.data, both we are setting it. And here it must be an empty array so that it will not change when we run first time. So we are adding the functions here to modify the user data like on change user. So here the properties changes, this is applied, this changes to the like changes by this dot changes to user state, this user state, and by dot user to combine current state of the user with the changes that are passed to this on change user function. So applying these changes to user by the help of operator, and set user is changes to this user. So whatever the changes we have to modify by on change user function, and going to write these changes to server. After changes we have to write this to the server actual server request to persist changes in backend. So on save user there is a button on change on save user function, this is also asynchronous. So server request url post request same as the get request, and include body contain updated user to write to server. Use object to add user, so it takes this user and modify its memory database to make that user persistent. So the so here the const response is same like axio, we are posting it like we are updating the server data. So users slash id, so this is the url at that particular server, we are updating this by the user. So the user is changes, whatever changes we are updating it. So set out original user to that updated user and set our user state also. So both our original user response.data which is we are getting from here and by post, and set user data also, both we have to update it in front end and back end. So rest the state user to state of the original user. So the this on rest user function will set the user to original user. So after this it will return the component. So component is this, this is the component with editable user, and we are passing the props. So these are the props. Where are the props? The components with editable, yeah. So the props we are passing here, and user on change user, on save user, and on reset user. So these are the props we are passing to the component. So user, on change user, on save user, on reset user. So these are passing to our with editable user.js, which is used in our another component called user info. So here with editable user is using user info form equal to with editable user and passing the props user, on change user, on save user, on reset 1 2 3 passes there. See, uh, 1 2 3 users and props. So 1 2 3 users, and these are the props. These are the props we are passing here, and the const. So this will be inside the body. We are using the const, which we fetching this data name, age, and hair color of equal to user or empty data. If the user loaded the data, it will be printing this form to all edit each piece of data instead of use state hook we call here props that HOC defines. So these are the props inside the GSX. So name, age, hair color, these are the props. So name, and on change, when we click edit on this section, so on change user function is calling, which will target e.target.value for each name, age, and hair color. And two buttons are used. On reset button, on reset user parameter is passing from with editable user to user info, and on save user. So you can see these props getting from this server, and user getting from the server. On change user, here it is defined, on save user, on reset user. So the user here is this from the API. All these properties we are fetching and pass it to the another component called user info form.js, and by the help of this component we are fetching the data and printing the data in the front end. And when everything is done, then we have to call this user info form to the app.js. So here it will return user info form. So when we run this node.js server and second npm run start, so you can see the name, age, hair color. I will show you simultaneously the code also, how it looks like. So with editable user user info form, sorry, so user is returning here, which is name, age, hair color, because we are passing here, this is the for component and this is 1 2 3. So 1 2 3 is the user ID. So see here the component, this is the component, which is this whole thing, and this is the user ID 1 2 3. So here you can see user ID 1 2 3 John Dio 54 Brown. Okay, so when I change here to Rahul, there is no changes here. Okay, so when I change here Rahul Chandra, save changes, can you see the changes here? When I refresh, when I reset, it is not working. 22 54 22, save changes, reset, white